I know you can't see the full outfit, but whenever I wear a white shirt with a black skirt, I feel like I'm about to perform in my secondary school's concert band. Hello, welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and I'm here to bring you my March wrap-up. Not my April wrap-up, my March wrap-up. March was a pretty good reading month for me once I gave up on my TBR. If you've been watching my vlogs, you will know this fact. Yeah, I read a bunch of stuff, actually. It is the 1st of April today, so it's all feeling reasonably fresh in my mind. But I have got my handy-dandy notebook, which should tell me the information I need, because I continue to not record anything on Goodreads or Storygraph. I'm just writing it down in a book because I've gone low tech. Yeah, I read 23 books in March, which is pretty good going. What did I read in February? See, look, I can refer back to it. It's genius. I read 16 books in February, so seven more books. That's pretty good going for me. 10 of which were rereads, the rest of which were new to me. And I will come on to totals for the year so far and totals for my TBR at the end, if I remember. If not, I'll edit them in. Let's go in vaguely chronological order as usual. I will smush series together, but otherwise we'll go beginning of the month to the end of the month. The first book I finished was American Hippo by Sarah Gailey. This is actually a bind-up of 2 books of River of Teeth and Taste of Marrow, and these were originally published in 2017 and 2018 respectively, I think, and they were Sarah Gailey's debut. I love their writing. I've loved everything that I've read that they've written. Oh, so good. I actually listened to both of these on audiobook and absolutely loved them. I think that River of Teeth is much stronger than Taste of Marrow because of the character introduction side of it. I just find that more exciting, but they're both very good and I like them bound up together. Yeah, I think this is really great. If you haven't already read this, I would definitely recommend. So it's about an alternate history America where they signed the bill that made them import a bunch of hippos and breed them for meat. And so it's like cowboys / ranching, but with hippos instead of horses or cattle. And it's fantastic. It's so good. Just the creative world building, the kind of caperness of it, would definitely recommend. Possibly one of my favourite things that I read this month. I'll reflect and come back to that at the end. After that, I read Fly By Night by Frances Hardinge. As you will know, if you watched my TBR, I did intend to read every single Frances Hardinge book that was on my shelf at the time. I didn't manage that, but I did read a couple. Fly By Night was actually the one I had read most recently. I can't remember exactly when, but I do like this book a lot. I definitely want to pick up the sequel. So this book is about a main character, Mosca, who is a girl who absolutely loves words. And when her father dies, she ends up in the care of her uncle, who's not particularly nice to her. And the story starts with she's burned down her uncle's mill and she runs off with a guy called Eponymous Clent, I believe. I think that's his name. Anyway, she runs off with him because he says he'll give her words if she'll be his assistant, and she's sort of quite persuasive. So her and her goose companion Saracen go on this adventure and they get caught up in a lot of politics. And there is a sequel to this that I have not read. I don't know if I want to keep this until I have read the sequel, and if I read the sequel and didn't like it, I would probably unhaul this. I really enjoyed it the first time I read it. The second time round, I was less enamoured with it. It got a bit more confusing towards the end. I love a lot of the world-building elements, but in terms of Frances Hardinge books, this is not my favourite. After that, I read Binti by Nedia Korafor. This is the first book in the Binti trilogy. I think they're probably better read as a bind-up, but I own just the first one. Little ditty novella. I actually did this by audiobook as well. I have a tendency to do that with novellas. Not all the time, which we will come on to, but sometimes. So yes, this is a girl called Binti who is travelling from, I can't remember where. Is it Earth? Not sure. But she's the first of her people to ever go to this big space university kind of thing. And she's travelling there and their ship gets attacked by the kind of, what are they called? The Medusa. That's what they're called. I imagine them as jellyfish, and I was about to say jellyfish, but that's not really that fair. So they get attacked by that, and there's a whole thing that happens that I can't spoil this, it's so short. But yeah, I thought this was beautiful. I loved the audiobook narrator. I really liked the story. I can see some people think this is a little bit shallow in terms of like it doesn't really go in depth on things. I think if you read a lot of novellas, that's kind of a familiar feeling, so I didn't personally mind it. I'm excited to get to the other 2. I don't know when that is going to happen, potentially in June, but I will reread this to do that because I think they're probably best read as a set. I think Angela has a full review for that trilogy, possibly, so I will link that if it exists. Review copy, I read All the Murmuring Bones, which is like a mermaid kind of book, family history, a bit of folklore. I liked it well enough. I found it very miserable. which I was kind of expecting because I have yet to find a really happy mermaid book. There were some recommendations on the vlog and I will get to them, but at the moment I've yet to find a happy mermaid book. I think that a lot of the story elements really work. There's a lot of kind of familiar-ish, your character has to outsmart something supernatural. There's some horror elements in there as well. I think horror's probably not the best word, that kind of like creepy house kind of vibe. So yeah, there were a lot of things that I thought were good about the book. I didn't like it. And I think that's a personal preference thing and the mood I was in at the time and the context in which I was reading it. So didn't love it, did not think it was bad. Does that make sense? After that, I read Shadowsent 2, Crown of Smoke, which is the sequel and I think the last book in the Shadowsent series by PM Freestone. So I did read Shadowsent in February, the first one, it's somewhere, and I liked it well enough. I really liked the world building in this series, much more than any of the other elements. I have to say this hasn't really stuck with me, and I think part of that was there was just too big of a gap between the two of them for a duology that's quite important that it follows on, just because there's a lot of stuff to remember. So I am going to keep it for now and give it another shot and see if I can like get on board with the plot of this world. Otherwise, I think I will let it go. As I say, I really like all of the little details of what would a world that's very scent-focused be like. I just don't necessarily love all of the characters or the choices that they make, and that's quite a large portion of the book, to be honest. Potentially a reread in the near future. I say in the near future, realistically next year. After that, I read the other Frances Hardinge book that I read this month, Deep Light. This is absolutely fantastic. This is one of my favourite books, probably of all time. I think it's one of those books that really feels like a me kind of story. There's a lot of spook to it, there's a lot of heart to it, and it's just exceptionally well written. Again, Frances Hardinge knocks it out of the park with the world building, but with an ocean focus. Like, this is me. I like it a lot. I'd forgotten a lot of the world building elements. I'd remembered that I liked the main character and I remembered that there were these undersea gods and that something happened with them. But I had forgotten the majority of the plot because, you know, I can only keep so many plots up in this noggin. So yeah, I have to say, now having reread it, even more fantastic, wonderful, and really nice to reread it because it felt so fresh. If you haven't read any Frances Hardinge before, this is the one that I personally recommend. I think a lot of people will probably recommend different ones, but I think that's another thing that I really love about her writing is that her books have so many different settings and so many different ideas in them that you can kind of find the one that sits well with you. Would definitely recommend. A fantastic reread. Loved reading it again. After that, I read Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon. This is wonderfully written. If you do not like bleak or kind of emotionally devastating fiction, then this is not a book for you. But if you are in the mood for that, or if you've read Fair Work before and you know that you get a lot out of that work, I don't want to say enjoyed because that sounds kind of voyeuristic, but get a lot out of it. This is a great addition. It's so wonderfully written. The voice is phenomenal. The kind of background to the story is great, and it has so much really great plot that I actually wasn't expecting. I thought it was going to feel a bit more conceptual and idea-based, but actually a lot of it is in the plot and the journey that the character goes on, but with a heavy speculative element to it that I don't want to spoil, so I'm not going to talk about it. But yes, if this is on your list of things to read, get hyped. Has really stuck with me as well. I think about it quite a lot, and that's always a sign of either a very, very bad book or a very good book. Do I still think about how much Court of Miracles annoyed me? Yes. Yes, I do. Bit of a tonal shift after that one into some nostalgic middle grade. This is Inkheart by Cornelia Funk. I never read this as a child. This was my first time ever reading Inkheart. I don't even think I'd ever, seen the film or came close to it. I don't really know why. I think it just never was the right timing for me. I'm just checking when it came out. 2003, 2004. So I would have been in primary school, so yeah, I probably would have been ideally situated to read this. I guess I was too busy reading, a fantastic book about women who were also gemstones, and it was French. One day I will find that book again. I don't really want to go into the plot of Inkheart. I feel like if you know it, you know, but this is a middle grade that a lot of people have read and loved. I thought it was good. It has that nostalgic middle grade feeling. Nostalgic, even though it's not nostalgia for me. It feels a lot like things that I used to read. It goes to darker places than I would have expected, but I think that just means it's not patronising, which I liked. I liked the main character. I think I don't necessarily have a big desire to read the rest of the series. If they fell into my lap, I would read them. I wouldn't be like, no desire to continue. But I'm not desperate to go out there and find out what happens next, which I think is in some ways quite an important thing for a middle grade series because you want to keep the kids engaged. But maybe that's just me. My battery's about to die, so let's pop this one down. I'll change my battery and we'll move on. And we're back. I read Shadow in the Glass, and this is a Victorian-esque set Cinderella retelling. And Cinderella is already a tricky retelling to go for. Add in that the fairy godmother is more of kind of a demon figure, and you get into wishes. It could have been really interesting. It could have been really good. Again, possibly a timing and context thing. There's a lot of violence against women and threat of sexual assault in this book, which I wasn't wild about reading. And I think my biggest issue with that in the context of the book is that there was never a real kind of payoff within the story of, but she has gained power and now she's winning, which I think the Cinderella story does have. It has a happy ending, and I don't think I needed a happy ending, but just like a cathartic ending would have been good. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you what the ending is in case you do want to read this, but all I will say is I wasn't wild about it. And I think I talked about this in the vlog, but she's set up as a character who understands and knows fairy tales and reads a lot, and then gets given wishes and makes bad wishes, and I can't get on board with that. If you read books, you know that wishes are complicated and you should word your wishes explicitly. Can't get on board with a character who is foolish when you've set up in the story that they shouldn't be. That's just me. Okie dokie. So after I finished that, I really pivoted away from my TBR, more so than ever before, and I read the entire Spellslinger series and the new one, Way of the Argosy, the prequel, which I will talk about in a moment. I have these two books which I will hold up to be representative, but there are 6 books in that series, plus the prequel. I really like this series. They are hugely fun to read. They are a real palate cleanser, very refreshing, very fast, easy to read, but not patronising and not too light. Like, there's difficult stuff in the story. I had a great time. You can watch that vlog if you want to hear my kind of blow-by-blow thoughts on reading that series. To speak to the prequel, which is the new release that I read, which is out. I think it's out already? I don't necessarily feel like the prequel is as good as it could be, and I think that's because it's a prequel, and what I actually want is like the side adventures of that character, who is a very cool character. It's Farius Parfax, is kind of this like wandering, really sassy, badass woman who does cool stuff, and this is her origin story, which is fine, but then it kind of feels like, oh, I'm not getting the fun of that character because I'm still in the place where they're figuring themselves out. I definitely still had a good time reading it, and it was interesting, but I don't think it needed to be a whole book. And I believe there is another book coming in that series, so I don't know if I'll like that one more because she'll be more established as a character, or if it'll just still feel kind of like, why does this exist? I think a spin-off would have been better than a prequel. Then I got into Animorphs reading because I really needed to, because Animorphs April is already happening. By the time you're watching this, the first video should have gone up. Have I filmed the other 3 videos yet? No, I have not. But the first one is ready. I read 18, 19, and 20. They've all jumbled in my head. I read 3 Animorphs books. The videos will be out by the end of April. After that, I finished The Gilded Ones, which is the Space Sirens book club pick for March. I think the live show is in either next weekend or the weekend after. I can't remember if I'm going to be able to be at that, but that's happening. I like this. I didn't love it. Wasn't like, oh, this is a YA that everyone and their mum should read. I liked it well enough. I thought that a lot of the kind of character reveal stuff was well done. I didn't love the romance. It felt a little bit tacked on. Yeah, I didn't get a huge amount of kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Substance from a few elements of the book that I think would have tipped it over the edge. My theory is that this is going to be a really good part of a trilogy. And when all 3 books are out, it will be a, oh yeah, that whole trilogy is really good fun. I think on its own it doesn't quite work, which is always the problem with new releases, because now we have to wait. But it'll be really interesting to see what everyone else thought about this one. The last physical books that I read in March were Silver in the Wood and Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. I have read these before. I think I read them in December of last year and then bought myself copies because I listened to the audiobooks and I wanted to own them because I love them so much. This is a NLM folklore, fable, I don't know what period it would be in, like kind of Victorian-esque, and the first one is their kind of them meeting, and the second one is like a second adventure, which I really like because it means they're both complete stories. I think these are beautifully written. I think they're fantastic. They are definitely on my novella recommendations list. I I just love them, and I think everyone should read them because they're fantastic, especially if you're the kind of person like me where you just love any kind of like the Green Man of the Wood kind of stories. Have I said kind of too many times? Absolutely, yes I have. Last couple of bits. I finished the audiobook of Fool's Quest, I think. I'll put the cover up, and if I'm wrong it'll be embarrassing. The second Fits in the Full book from Robin Hobb. I listened to it on audiobook and I'm still really loving picking up those books. They are hugely emotional books. There's a lot that happens and there's a lot of waiting around for somebody to realise something, which is fine when you know that's what you're going in for. And you know, 4 series in, I kind of know what I'm getting in for. I think if you picked up this series having not read anything before, you would be very, very confused regardless. So maybe that's a bit of a moot point. I'm very excited to get to the third one, and as ever, I think treating it like a trilogy as a whole rather than as individual books, kind of like with the Gilded Ones, I think it's going to be much more interesting because second books are always a bit tricky. Where do you take things? And I think that there was a lot of waiting around in this book that potentially will happen less in book 3, I don't know, but I'm excited to nearly be done. And lastly, not actually the last thing I read, but we've gone out of order a little bit, I finished Thorn, which is just out in paperback in the UK, so I had a review copy of that. It's been out for a while, but it is a fantastic retelling of The Goose Girl. It's a YA fantasy retelling, which I haven't read one that I really loved in quite a long time, and this one, it just really caught me. Like, the main character was good, it didn't shy away from the grittier bits of the story. There was a lot of discussion of kind of violence against women and safety of women out on the streets at night, but it made sense as part of the story and it didn't just feel like a misery fest or kind of that voyeurism. It just felt good and I really liked the story and it had a really good ending and I'm really excited to read the sequel. I can't remember whether that's out already, if that's coming out soon. Everything I needed in a YA fantasy retelling. It's for sure on that list of recommendations, which one day I will make. I will film retellings you should actually read. So yeah, 23 books, there you go. 24 if you split out American Hippo into 2. I'm just saying, I'm not going to do that, but I could. My total books read for the year so far is 61 out of roughly 200 is what I'm going for, so 3 months in, quarter of the year. Yeah, that worked out. It's about right. I think we should hit it even with a few more bad months. My TBR, this is the depressing bit, my TBR at the start of March was 48 books. My TBR at the end of March is 46 books. Only 2 books down. I feel like I read a lot down. I'm trying to think what was new that would have been on there at the start. I think those 2 would have been on there at the start. Gilded Ones, American Hippo, Binti, Inkheart. Yeah, like I read down a lot of stuff, just also a lot of things came in. What can you do? Books, that happens. I think I would really like to get my TBR down under 40 in April. I don't know if that can happen because I've not got that many, this is my April TBR, I've not got that many non-rereads, but I think it should be doable. I believe in myself. What can I say? I'm going to do it. So stay tuned and find out. If I had to pick a favourite book of the month, I think it would be American Hippo, specifically the first half. I think that was just a great time. That wasn't a reread. Deep Flight would be my one if I was including rereads. Worst book of the month, probably Shadow in the Glass. It just wasn't for me. All the Murmuring Bones tipped over in that it was more interesting as a story, I think. Have you read any of these recently or this month? Let me know what your thoughts are. Have we aligned in our mindset? Do you actually love one of the books that I didn't like? I'd love to know. While you're down there commenting, please do also subscribe if you haven't already. I put out 4 videos a week in April and 3 videos a week normally, but there's loads and loads of content coming out. There's a lot of books publishing in April, so there should be a good number of reviews coming and everything. I think that's all. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. But yeah, I thought this was what's in my eye. Gilded Ones, which is the Space Sirens book.